Okay, I think we're going to start the meeting up. This is the February 9th, 2023 Town of Fishkill Planning Board meeting, and the meeting is called to order at 7:01 p.m. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, as always, please silence all cell phones just so we don't disturb people in the room. And also speak as directly into the microphone as you can when you are speaking. We have one member absent tonight. Felix Lopez called in at the last minute and said he wasn't feeling well. So I would like to appoint our alternate member, Kevin O'Connell, to be a full voting member at tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And welcome, everybody. Good to see you all. Also, I welcome again Joe Berger, who's our engineer sitting in for the first application that we'll be getting to tonight. So welcome, Joe. Also, I wanted to mention something special about tonight. Debbie Corona has been working here with the town for 25 years, and I understand that this is her anniversary.
That's correct.
So we'd like to congratulate you for your longevity, and I wish you another 25 years with the town.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
But no, thank you for all the work that you do. And
you're welcome.
We appreciate all of your knowledge and experience and all of the assistance that you provide for this board in particular. Okay. Also, for the public's information, just wanted to let you know that this board might go into what we call a closed session this evening at the very end of the meeting to seek advice of our attorney. So when and if we do that, we'll see how late it is. But I think this meeting, I shouldn't say it, but I don't think it's going to be. It's not going to be a bad meeting. Let's put it that way. It's going to be a really good meeting. And so if we get to that point and go into closed session, we'll basically shut off the broadcast and the taping, and we'll let the AV people go home at that point. And then once that closed session is over, the board will come back into regular session and adjourn. So, all right, having said all that, let's get to the minutes. This would be approving and adopting the December 8th, 2022 meeting minutes. I, as chair, had sent corrections and edits into Debbie in the planning office earlier this week, I think. So do any members have any additional comments or corrections for those minutes?
Actually, Mr. Cantor did send me some as well via email. The other Mr. Cantor.
The other Mr. Cantor.
Good to see.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Fred.
You're welcome.
All right. So hearing no additional comments or corrections, would someone like to make a motion to approve and adopt the minutes of the December 8th, 2022 meeting?
I will do that.
What Fred did, and maybe Robbie would second it? Okay.
That's what I heard.
All right, Robbie seconds it. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes 7-0. All righty. Okay, so we are getting right into project reviews. The first one is 1556 Route 52 and 1562 Route 52 Site Development Plan, Special Use Permit, and Floodplain Development Permit board to review submission made by the applicant's representative on January 25, 2023. All right, well, welcome.
Good evening, Tom Kivett from Chestnut Markets. I don't know if you want me to go through the changes that were last submitted, or if...
Please, yeah, why don't you do that? That
So
would
we
be
did
helpful.
include some landscaping along Route 52. We also included some signage. Let me see if I can switch it here real quick.
There we go.
So some minor landscaping along Route 52, as well as along the east property boundary. And further to the south, I believe we added a fence along the drive-through.
South line, yes.
What's that again?
On the south line, you have the fence.
Right, correct, yep. We added signage as well along Route 52. The details are on the last page. Let me get to it. So a monument sign detail along Route 52 as well. In addition to that, I think that was all the changes, and some minor, I guess, stormwater drainage that was also, some pretty minor changes to the site from the last time we had submitted. But if there's anything in particular that you would like to review or go over.
All right, well, I think at this point, why don't we ask Mr. Berger to summarize his engineering memo?
Just make sure the microphone.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
How's that? Yeah. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I sent you a letter dated 2/4 with my comments and review. Pretty much the applicant has replied to everything we requested. Property information and the information on the expansion versus the phasing were provided on sheets 1 and 2. The EAF was revised with some minor things that needed to be filled out. They were all added and revised. The joiners were keyed in. Sheet 2, all minor things, which were just labeling and minor things were all provided. On sheet 3, as the applicant has stated, they provided the landscaping along the sides on sheet 6, and they provided the fence along the drive-through as we requested. The loading area was also shown with the detail on sheet 8. The existing septic system was labeled. It was always shown but not labeled. This is a minor. The stormwater was shown last presentation. This time they provided a stormwater report sizing the structure they have there, and it was adequate. The stormwater report was fine. It answered all the questions, and basically the increase in impervious that they have on the site will be handled by the stormwater practice that they propose completely. The details for lighting was provided in sheet 6. Reviewing what the county planning stated, I looked at what they responded to, and the applicant has stated, and we concur, that the lighting industry standard, which is 15, 20 foot candles and sometimes up to 32 depending on which standard you use, is recommended for safety reasons. The county recommended a much lower number, but the industry standard is based on safety. They mentioned about the Route 52 entrance. The planning board does have some input on recommendation, but it's technically a DOT entranceway. If the planning board has particular recommendations on that, they can send that to the DOT resident engineer to consider when they make their determination, and they probably should if you do have strong feelings. Otherwise, they will make the decision on their own.
Could I ask a quick question about that now while we're on it? So normally, does the DOT in normal circumstances require pretty much one curb cut into a site like a commercial site like this when
They try on gas stations. They've been allowing 2. Gas stations are a unique feature with DOT. It's not unheard to have an in and out type of thing. They may restrict one of those to no left turns, and that's more common than not. But they have, and they're very typically will allow, especially when they're existing, and they try to control it more with signage. However, if the planning board has strong feelings and makes a recommendation, they often will take that in consideration if they're leaning in one way or another.
Yeah, I'm not sure, well, we can canvass the board on that,
And the same one.
but I know that the county in their GML referral letter suggested only 2 access points, one on Route 52 and one on Party Lane.
Yeah.
So we'll have to think about that. You know, the way the gas station and convenience store site are configured are such that they're really kind of 2 separate uses. The convenience store users may or may not be using the gas station part, although typically people do, but there could be
True.
people who are going to be using one or the other, not both. And
True.
so it might make sense in some ways to have, you know, the 2 separate,
Yes.
maybe restricted entrances on Route 52.
I mean, it's been working, I mean, unless there's an accident history, which I'm unaware of, where there's a problem there now, that's something that DOT usually takes into consideration as well,
Yeah.
and there's none that I'm
It's
aware
wide
of.
open right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no curb
It's their road,
cuts.
they're going to control it.
Got the,
Yeah, but-
oh, go ahead, Fred, yeah, go
Yeah, but
ahead.
if you have 2 people leaving, one going right on the left side and one going left on the other side, and the way it's drawn is that both have in and outs.
Correct.
Well, they
So
will
you
probably
have 4
control
in and
that.
outs. And I can see that an accident happening right off the bat. And you
Right.
still have Party Lane for people who want to go that way.
Correct, yeah. The Party Lane's a little bit of a gray
I just see
area.
that as a danger, because I do use that gas station.
Right.
And it's,
I mean, we would be open to the right hand only for one of the exits on the repair side. This is still under DOT review. They haven't given us an answer yet.
Yeah. So
Yeah, go
so
ahead.
just look at it
if
the way
the
it's down
board
here, it's-
has
I
concerns
just see
tonight, they
An
should,
accident happening,
Right.
and the only advantage to that accident happening has been at the firehouse right there.
Go
so
ahead, Joe.
if the board has concerns on these things, they should probably articulate it in a letter sent to the DOT as they're reviewing it, so they can take that in consideration when they make that decision earlier. Once they make it, having that comment go into them will not change their mind, more likely
Yeah.
than not, unless you have accident data to back it up. So this would be the time, and not to give you more work to do tonight, but if you do want some recommendations on there, tonight would be the night to refer a letter to them.
Can I ask, like, is there any reason you need the double?
Well, that was at the request of the property owner, because they are still 2 separate lots. He didn't want to lose access to Route 52. Even though we have Party Lane, it's a bit of a gray area because it's technically not on our property and it's a private lane. We also didn't want to, in the future, maybe lose that as a potential, if they change, if the property owner decides to change that access to
Yeah,
that.
but majority of people who use the gas station now, they pull in the front, they go out the back.
Correct,
They go out-
yeah.
They leave Party Lane.
Myself included, yeah.
Yeah, it just does not make any sense.
Right. I mean, if we have an agreement, I guess with the property owner that owns Party Lane, that would maybe, appease the property owner a little bit. But for now, I guess the main concern is the access for that parcel to Route 52.
Maybe you could clarify something about Party Lane, because the site plan drawings show Party Lane as a public right-of-way.
Okay.
So maybe you
might
could
be a-
describe what's going on there.
That might be an old note. From the last meeting, from what I understand, it is a part of the adjacent property. I mean, it doesn't have a stop sign or anything on it. It's just, it's just kind of a driveway, if you will.
But you have Blue Seal using it,
Correct, yeah.
and you also have the property, the houses on the right using it.
Right.
And then you have the other building in the back using it, and that's their only access, is
Right.
Party Lane.
Okay,
So-
we could do some easement research, I guess.
Yeah, so Joe, what would your suggestion be on that? There must be some records of what the status of that road is.
Yeah, the
but-
surveyor should be able to provide that information. I thought it was, based on what was shown here, it's a public right-of-way. My assumption was you had an easement across it. I
Okay.
would have your surveyor check that.
Okay,
Because in the
we'll double-
survey, he should be able to clarify with the Lieber and Page
Right.
what right you have.
Okay.
And I think the planning board should have that information if there's a question,
Yeah.
because
Right.
that is relevant to a lot of the decisions being made on the closure on the state
Right.
highway, and the DOT would want to know that too.
Right, okay.
Just because you have access onto that if you don't have any written access, that's important for everybody to know.
Right.
So your surveyor should warn, he did the boundary, he would be doing the boundary of that as well and telling you your rights,
Okay.
so.
And not that we necessarily want to rehash the conversation about the possibility of merging or consolidating the two parcels, because we talked about that before, and actually that's still something I'm interested in, but that's just yet another complication that the owner is putting himself into by doing it the way he's proposing.
Correct.
There are going to, there could be access issues, there could be cross easement issues that all need to be addressed if they're not consolidated.
Right.
And it could get kind of complicated.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you choose not to make them consolidate, I defer to the attorney, but I would probably recommend that you have some cross easements prepared as part of the site plan and accept it, so the two different uses on the site are clearly used on both sides, especially the canopy. And I defer to the town attorney on the form and content on that, but that's not uncommon to have cross easements as part of the approval package.
Yes, and further to state that if the ownership changes, you could
You need a
require.
microphone? Yeah.
Another item to consider in this kind of situation would be to have a note on the plan that indicates that if ownerships were to change for those two lots, that they would have to come back before the board to make sure that the uses that are happening then are consistent with what was approved by the planning board, if and when it gets to that point.
So without getting too much more into that particular issue of the parcels, I guess I would simply request that internal communications go on further with the owner
Right.
as to the benefits and negatives of keeping them separate parcels versus consolidating them. And then I'm sure the board will be talking more about that in the future. So you want to go on, Joe?
Yeah, I have two more items, Mr. Chair. The last was the county requesting or suggesting a reduction in the number of parking. The only real, other than not having the parking spaces, one of the reasons was reduction in impervious. The drainage report and the drainage fixtures that they have provided handle that issue with making sure that the stormwater increase is not occurring due to this increase. And so the stormwater management is well maintained, that sometimes having a little bit more parking for a dual-use site is nice to have versus not. And the applicant is taking that position, and I concur with it. And then the last thing is there's a number of variances that are needed. The applicant will now have to go at the next step in moving forward to go for those variances.
Debbie, did you want to say
Yes, I
anything
can share
about
with the
that?
board that they have applied for variances,
Okay,
and
good.
they've knocked it down to 2 variances.
Oh, good.
They're going to be on the February 21st meeting. However, I think, as you all know, I circulated the NOI on the 8th, so the 30 days for the circulation won't end till 30 days from the 8th of February, so the ZBA really can't take any action until
Next meeting.
we close secret.
Well, yeah, so not just the 30 days for the notice of intent,
Right.
but the full secret determination,
review.
is my understanding.
Exactly.
Yep.
So when you say they knock down to 2
I think
variances,
Mr. Kiva could probably explain that better than I can.
yeah, please.
Right, yeah, we clarified that a little bit. Go back to the page here.
So first, maybe start by telling us which are the 2 variances that are going before the zoning board, and
I think there were some, I guess, miscommunications regarding the first submission about
If
the
you
amount
can't
of...
find it, what I can do is I can pull up the ZBA app on mine and read you what
Okay.
you have.
Right, yeah, I should have,
All right, let me do that.
I'm a Luddite here on this,
I don't think you made it part of that submission,
okay, I
but
thought
I could
that,
be incorrect.
I thought we had them listed here on the cover sheet here.
well, the one I know that must still be there is the rear yard setback variance for the convenience store.
Correct, and then I see, let me see. So I guess, yeah, it's
I have the statement if you need me to read it.
Oh, yes, please.
Front yard setback variance of 1 foot 10 inches where 35 feet is the minimum setback requirement in the GB. Said variance would result in a 33-foot 4-inch front yard setback. And the second and final variance is a rear yard setback variance of 12 feet 7 inches where 30 feet is the minimum setback requirement in the GB. Said variance would result in an 18-foot 7-inch rear yard setback.
So the two signage ones are no longer, those are now in compliance? There was one here about the sign height and then the sign.
No, actually, those were new ones.
Those are new
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
Okay.
Why don't you mention those?
Yeah, because that's not part of their ZBA application.
Yeah, we actually heard that in the county's GML letter, I think, for the first time, probably. That may be because the signs weren't, the details weren't provided until just recently, I guess.
Correct.
But so, yeah, those could be additional sign variances that you might need to seek from the zoning board. And I think the county mentioned 3, right?
Mr. Chair, is all the parking going to be shared parking between the garage and the,
Look at the applicant, I don't know.
is all the parking going to be shared?
The lots are...
Because he does
Right.
mechanical work there.
Correct. Yeah.
So when he's not, if he has more than 2 cars, something has to be outside.
Right, right. So that's one of the other reasons we didn't want to reduce the amount of parking on the site. It's for the amount of the vehicles that he's going to be working on.
So people who are going to go to Chestnut and the first 6 or 5 parking spots, because one's reserved for handicap, all right? So if you're not using it for handicap, somebody else can park there. So you really have 5 spaces going in. You have employees. You're going to have at least 2 employees.
Correct, yeah.
And I'm going to assume they're not going to be parking out front. That'd be bad for business if they take the parking spots out front.
No, yeah, they would park along the side.
Well-
So we'd most likely share parking with the lot for employees and that.
So we probably, talking about the parcels, again, shared parking between the parcels, some kind of an agreement would probably be needed on that as well.
Okay. Could that fall under, I guess, the broader shared access with parking, pedestrian, utilities? I mean, it kind of...
Probably, yeah.
Okay. We're hoping to put that, together in one package and kind of a blanket easement or access
Yeah.
easement.
I mean, we might need to get a little bit more input from our attorney on that, but
Could this board consider granting the applicant the ability to speak with our attorney on potential easement language? I mean, I think seeing as this is the way it's going to go in terms of the lots remaining separate, it might be prudent to allow that discussion to begin now.
sure. Dominic, do you think that would be a good idea?
Sure, I'd be happy
Yeah.
to.
All right, why don't we do that now before we forget? Would somebody like to make a motion authorizing our attorney to be in communication with the applicant's attorney or representatives?
So moved.
Anthony moves it. Is there a second?
Second.
Bob seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's all done. Joe, did you have anything else?
No,
to
that was
cover?
everything.
Okay. Oh, getting back to the sign, the possibility of variances, so the county's language on that is that the proposed monument sign is 9 feet high, which is 3 feet taller than the maximum allowed by code, which would be 6 feet, including the base. The sign area is 54 square feet per side, excluding the base. That's substantially more than the maximum allowed by code, which is 16 to 20 square feet per side if double-sided. And then they also seem to think that the sign may be closer to the road edge than the 15-foot minimum setback in the code. So those are all things to check into. The county was of the opinion that the sign should be reduced in size and location to conform to the code. sometimes understandably, that's not entirely possible, but that would be something to look at, certainly.
Correct, yes. We started the basic design with the lettering for the price ID is the same as exists today on the existing ladder sign. And then the leftover was the square footage for the Chestnut Market and the mobile signage.
Mr. Chair, we also requesting electric on one of the parking spots, like we're doing everything else.
I think we had talked about that, didn't we?
I don't believe we did for this project.
Why don't you bring it up then?
Mr. Applicant, did you have?
I don't want to do all the talking.
Again, I direct things to you, but it's, did we talk about putting electric? I'm pretty sure we didn't.
Right, I don't believe
But
we have.
we're requesting each new parcel today, based on what's coming down the line,
Right.
will have at least one spot.
Right,
Because if you have an employee who would park in there long-term, or somebody else who wants to do it,
right.
we're going to need it.
Yeah, yeah. So we are currently working with Tesla and a couple other manufacturers for a lot of the sites. Some of these companies require up to 8 spots minimum to do business with them. There are,
We don't need 8 spots for your park.
right, there are less, less powerful chargers that we could install, that we don't need service upgrades for that. So we could look into that. From our experience, those usually sit empty for a lot of times.
Yeah.
If we could share parking with that, I don't know how that would work out necessarily.
I do not know either, but we are requesting at least one for each of the new sites coming in, because we believe that sometime you're going to have an employee there who will be there for a long period of time.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, they're mostly local, so hopefully they get their charge at home. And, it's like getting a gas pump at your house at night that pumps a couple gallons cheaper. It's a lot of the businesses that we see and pay attention to usually have those spots just sit empty, or someone else will just park there instead of an EV. But we do understand the need for it. It's just a matter of practicality if we're kind of short on spaces already for sharing parking with both sites.
Well, maybe it could be dual use, as long as it's available. The person who needs it, they can kick the other person out.
Right. I mean, if we could designate it as an employee slash EV and maybe put a sign, as long as maybe an employee can park there. We sometimes do that in front of dumpsters if they come and, they can move their car easily to get access to somebody that needs it. But that's something we can look into for sure.
Yeah, please, I think that would be a good idea. We are, as Fred was mentioning, trying to get applicants to incorporate energy efficiency and
Right.
things like that into their sites where
Okay.
possible. All right, any questions from other board members? Questions, comments, observations?
And what did we say about the sidewalk on him? We did talk about, did we talk about sidewalk?
I believe last meeting, there were comments on the.
We did. What was the result?
So I
From
think
your end?
our answer was to move the ice machine, because we have an ice bunker out front, and then we also have propane tanks and an air machine. So we did have those located further in towards the entranceways, which narrowed the sidewalk substantially. So I think the county, I'm not sure exactly where the comment came from, but I remember it was two wheelchairs needed to be side by side, which I guess gave us a 5-foot width.
Oh, you're talking about, you're talking about parking now?
Yeah, just outside the building, yeah.
No, I was talking about a sidewalk in the front of the property.
Oh, on Route 52, okay, yeah. I think we did,
We
yeah.
did talk about it. I don't know I didn't see anything on it.
Right, yeah, I think it was like a sidewalk to nowhere kind of thing. I don't know if the fire department has one planned. I mean, there's, the Blue Seed, I don't believe has a sidewalk.
No, but we're now trying to establish one, so in the future,
Right.
as we do, because that is a prime area for sidewalks coming,
Okay,
and people may want to walk to your convenience store as opposed to drive to your convenience store.
right, yeah.
We did just complete a review of a car wash renovation on Route 9, and what the applicant agreed to was putting a note in their site plan indicating that if and when sidewalks were added on Route 9 in that vicinity by other owners, that they would also add a sidewalk at that time.
Okay,
So maybe that's the way we should go with this one.
Okay,
Because again, it's sort of like starting, you have to start somewhere, but
right.
it's hard to start when no one else has started also. So I think we recognize that.
Yeah, we could, yeah, that's something we could put on the plans for sure.
That side of 52 for sidewalks is like, doesn't really make, I'm sorry, it doesn't really
Yeah.
kind of make sense.
Although someday, you know,
And Mr. Chairman, I think the note would be probably the best, Matt, because then at that time, you have a coordinated design of the sidewalk. And you've seen these in other municipalities where they do them piecemeal. You get these sidewalks that have bends and 90 degrees in them that wouldn't normally go
Yeah.
because they were built in stages.
yeah.
So having the note would be
They
a
might
much better
not
way of
match
how-
up, right.
Exactly. And so I've had experience in that where that's happened. So I think the note would be your better way of getting a more user-friendly sidewalk in the future.
And of course, I do think that state DOT will play a large role in whether or not, or when sidewalks will go on roads like that.
Yeah, right now, the DOT, in my experience in other municipalities, wants a sidewalk on the private side, not within the state right-of-way when possible.
Okay, so that's kind of a change, I think, from past years. where
Previous,
they-
yes.
They actually preferred to have them in
And
the state
now it's
right-of-way.
different, and if the sidewalk does go within the right-of-way, it needs a use and occupancy permit, which means the applicant will be paying a yearly fee for that sidewalk to be there. That's a new change within our new DOT.
I'll just follow up what Fred was saying by mentioning that
Yeah.
the town's draft update of our comprehensive plan is very much supporting putting in sidewalks where they don't exist, and Route 52, both east and west of Route 9 was one of those mentioned as being high priority areas.
Yes, and don't forget, someday we might have a project coming on the other side of that, which is our defunct storage parcel, which may
Yeah.
not be for that use in the future, who knows? So that would be attached to this too.
Well, we actually have that site coming up for a pre-application meeting in a week or so, so you'll hear more.
Okay, so
You'll
you're
hear
ahead of
more
the
about
game,
that.
so, yeah.
With
So
that,
that's going to attach.
yeah, I think the note's appropriate here then. I mean, it doesn't make sense for this applicant to put the sidewalk in as part of this application, but the note is the way to go. Especially since the geometry of this, the lot line kind of doesn't line up with the existing curb anyway, so to have them put in the sidewalk as part of this application probably wouldn't even look right. So the note's the way to go.
While we're talking about the Route 52 right-of-way, I noticed that the county also talked about street trees. So this is a difficult issue on a site like this where there's not a lot of room in the front part of the site.
Right.
And we certainly wouldn't want to do anything that would restrict views of vehicles entering or exiting the site, or just in general on Route 52. But
Right, we're open to low bushes, we do that a lot of our stations to do beautify or beautification of the site, but the trees we don't believe would be appropriate here either.
well, that might be something that we could look into further, and, I think what we're probably going to do, and I'll ask maybe the board to authorize that I prepare a letter on behalf of the board to DOT, talking about the access points primarily, but
Right.
since the county brought up the question of whether some types of street trees might be appropriate on the frontage at the street, it probably could be a question we could pose to DOT as to, what their experience has been with adding small street trees in those kinds of settings where they wouldn't block any kind of either physically or visibly activity on the road, and see what they say.
Right.
Okay. Meanwhile, I was going to just add my own observations on the landscaping plan. I think it's a good start, but it does look a little bit sparse, so I think anything that can be done to add a little bit of more greenery, on the edges of parking areas or on other
Right, yeah.
parts of the site would be good.
Agreed, yeah, the eastern part of the site could use a few extra, being a fan of Bob Ross, this guy looks a little too lonely here, so we can, you know, add a few trees there. You know, it doesn't block the sign, it doesn't block the views. But we'll definitely look into adding more plants for sure.
The building elevations, I appreciate that you submitted those. The sides and back do look a little bit sparse, and understandably, it's the front that most people are going to see, but
Right.
there are going to be views of the sides and to some degree in the back because people will be using the drive-through. So I guess my comment is just anything that could be done to perhaps embellish the building facades on the sides and rear
More
a little
signs.
bit. Well, I mean,
We stayed away from doing that on this side because of the approach on 52 traveling west, this side of the building. We did it on street view. You kind of gauge the location of the building. It doesn't really have too much visibility from that side of the road. So we kind of kept it on this side. So we do have our propane and our air machine on that side. It's a little more utilitarian, but I mean, we could look into some kind of architectural downlighting from the soffits at night that might illuminate the siding a little bit better. Other than that, I'm not exactly sure what we would be able to do on that.
did any other board members have any thoughts on that topic?
What are you doing, we talked about noise from the box, because I'm assuming they're going to have some sort of box.
Correct,
order.
yeah. Yep.
Yes?
That's going to be on the west side of the
And
building.
you have a house right over there? You have two houses over there that's still going to be occupied?
The houses to the south belong to the fire department. I believe they're getting raised. This one, I know for certain, I believe.
Well, I thought they said they were keeping one house up. They weren't taking the second house down. Number, whatever Party Road?
I mean, I know this one's going down for sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the front one's coming down for sure.
Okay.
I'm talking about the ones in the back.
Oh, no, this one, yes.
It's still showing there.
Right, yeah, this one's,
And you have another one, so you have two of them in the back that are going to be using Party Lane. And those have numbers on it, number something Party Lane, 2 and 4 Party Lane or something.
right, yep.
What are we doing to block the noise, especially to the one to the left?
So this house is, from what I understand, going to be a retention pond for the fire department. And then the sound that is mostly coming from the west side of the building here. So if there is any sound escaping, it's going to have to travel through the building or bounce off neighboring structures and then reach the site. So we're kind of shielded from this house down here from the sound of the drive-through speaker, which will be located in this area.
Okay. So you're saying that that two-story, that is coming down? I don't remember that on the fire department.
I don't know, we'd have to go back and look at their approved plan.
Because, and what type of shrubbery are you putting in the back of that building on this side, that little bit of green?
Oh, this is going to be all fence here.
You're going to, just a fence?
Yes.
Yeah, his plans show a 6-foot-high vinyl fence.
Yeah, and there is a detail on one of the drawings. Yeah, I guess, I mean, I was hoping that there might be some landscaping with the fence, but it's pretty tight in there, so I guess I can understand why there isn't landscaping proposed in there.
If I remember correctly from the last meeting, I do remember a retention pond coming here, and there was comments about concerns of people being able to access that pond. I don't know how deep it is. I haven't seen a design on it either. But that the fence would provide more security, I guess, from people wandering around. I don't know
Yeah.
who would be back there looking to visit a retention pond, but you never know.
Let's see. Well, something I think we're going to need to see regarding the gas pump canopy extension, showing how it fits in with the existing canopy with some kind of an elevation or schematic drawing, and also showing the recessed lighting in the canopy
Okay, yeah.
with the details. And then, so that's another thing, just in general, on any lighting fixtures, what, we'll need like cut sheet details of all the lighting fixtures to make sure that they're properly shielded and, downlit.
Okay. I know that these guys, when we have the canopy design, they'll strip it down of everything down to the bones, and then they'll add whatever they need to onto it.
Yeah, so in effect, it will look like a new canopy, I assume.
Correct, yeah. So we have to scab it together, but it has to be structurally sound, so they do
Yeah.
it pretty quick. It's, you know, I'll let that up to the engineers, but we could provide those drawings.
Yeah.
I'm also confused who the tenant, on the tenant sign, who's the tenant?
That'll be Chestnut Market. So we have sites,
Oh, this is just a general picture?
Yeah, so in other words,
sorry, the drive-through? I'm sorry.
so there's still going to be a separate owner once all this stuff is built, who will own the parcels, but will be leasing the parcels
Correct, yeah.
for these uses.
I believe Fred was referring to the sign that was provided in the details.
Oh, right. The tenant, yeah, so that would be, so right now, we're looking at our own options in-house for food service. We have hired chefs to help us prepare menus for that.
Okay, so you're going to have something else in your building in Chestnut?
Correct, so that's, you know. it could,
Gotcha,
you know,
okay.
It could either be, you know, us or somebody else, but right now, it's going to be us. That's the plan.
Now, would that food service be anything that would necessitate a grease trap?
Most of our stuff is pre-packaged, so it would be minimal grease usage, similar to a Dunkin' Donuts where they don't really cook food on site anymore. So it's they have, if we do have anything, it would be most likely under sink. Underneath each sink would have their own individual grease trap. But nothing would end up in the sewers. But no need for one of the large, you know, external grease traps.
Good catch.
And the county was also suggesting a certain type of bike rack, so we appreciate the fact that a bike rack was shown on the plan.
Yep.
They're recommending an inverted U type, which, and they have a good bit of information on those, so I think they referred us to their website where they have recommendations like that, so
Right.
take a look at that.
Okay.
So there are detailed drawings for the monument sign, the fence, and the dumpster enclosure details. I looked at it and they look fine to me. Just wanted to check to see whether other board members have had any comments on those types of details.
No comments on those.
I'm done.
Okay.
Did we go into the canopy lighting at all? I know the county made a
Yeah.
comment about that, and
Well, yeah, and Mr. Berger also made comments about that. So I think where we are is that we definitely will want to see recessed lighting in the canopies, but that, yeah, the county did reiterate their concerns with the intensity of the lighting and kind of took the position that too bright a lighting under canopies can be dangerous because people will use them under, you know, they'll do what they're doing under the canopy, leave, and then all of a sudden, it's much darker wherever they're exiting to. So, you know, I can see both sides of the picture. I think so far, we're hearing the recommendations of Mr. Berger, our engineer, indicating that the higher intensity of the lighting under a canopy are appropriate for gas stations.
Yeah. And Mr. Chairman, if I may compare, 15 to 20 foot candles is what they're going for. If you drive around Dutchess County, you remember the old Amaretta Hess and the Mobiles, they're up at 40. And that's what people are thinking about. Mobile and Hess always requires a 40 to 60 foot candle. So we're kind of used to that in that Dutchess County. And that has, the industry has agreed that that is too much because what you just exactly explained, and industry standards have dropped to a 15 to 20, even though some are still recommending 32. Most of them are recommending around a 15 to 20 as the new standard to bring it down, but still keeping safety in mind. But when you're thinking about those really light gas stations you drive around in now, those are at 40. So I'm just giving you kind of a comparison when you think about the numbers.
I think that's a very helpful explanation. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, I know sometimes the county does continue to make comments like that that are, you know, maybe, I guess in some people's minds, not, either not looking at today's standards, or maybe they're trying to create, new standards for the area, but we don't often communicate details like that in our, I know when we get comments from the county, we're supposed to provide them with information or documentation of what responses were made to their letters. Usually, we simply indicate that the project was approved, but in this case, maybe we want to give them an additional comment about that type of lighting issue.
True.
Anyway, that's a thought. Okay. So I'll just turn to Dominic to see if you have any other questions or comments about this proposal.
No, sir.
Okay. So, so seeker, the planning board did classify this as an unlisted action at the January meeting and declared our intent to serve as lead agency. And the lead agency notice was just circulated on February 8th. So that means the 30-day window for involved agencies to respond would be March 10th. So there's still a ways to go on that. In fact, the next planning board meeting is March 9th, which is before that 30-day window. However, I was going to ask the board and our consultants at this point to start thinking about scheduling a public hearing. Would it be too soon or appropriate to schedule at least an initial first part of the public hearing for the March 9th meeting, which certainly, if necessary, could be continued at the April meeting? But what do you think? And then I'll canvass the board.
Mr. Chair, I think it's appropriate to ask for a public hearing to get some public input now.
Are they going for, Mr. Chair, aren't they going for variance?
They are going for variances, and us holding a public hearing doesn't cause us to do anything other than hear from the public.
Okay.
It's really our seeker determination that triggers when other involved agencies can take their actions.
I would like to understand Party Road a little bit further before we go any further, because if it turns out it's a private road, that could change our opinion and perhaps the design of the project, and perhaps that should be hashed out before we have a public hearing.
Oh, that's a good point.
Would that be something we could provide to you before March 9th meeting? Well, I guess we'd have to if we're going to be continuing.
Yeah, you would have to do that anyway, but I think that should be part of your next submission, but it really has to do with the question of whether the board would be in a position to actually hold a public hearing on March 9th and then possibly to keep it open
Based
until
on
April.
that, based on the response we get, we could lead to a result and change of design that we discuss at the March meeting and then would be submitted before the April meeting. So we'd like to see what that change could be if it goes in that direction before we have a public hearing. That's my thought process here.
Yeah. Do others on the board agree with that thought process?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so I thought I would bring up the subject of a public hearing, so it looks like kind of the consensus of the board right now is to hold off on scheduling a public hearing until we get those additional details. But possibly at our March meeting, we might be in a position to schedule a public hearing for the April meeting, depending on what we find out.
And if we potentially hold the public hearing in April, then the 30-day window for seeker would be
Would be up,
closed, fully closed by then.
Right.
So it would serve that purpose as well.
Okay. So unless anyone has any other questions or comments, I think that probably should do it for tonight on this application. Going once.
No, no other comments.
Okay,
It's all right, you can go on.
all right, well, thank you
Sorry,
very
I'm
much.
making notes.
All right, thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Sorry about that, John, I was making notes.
No, no. Thank you, Mr. Berger.
Thank you all.
Okay, the next application is 415, 453 US Route 9 and CHI Acquisition Site Development Plan, two-lot subdivision, floodplain development permit, and freshwater wetlands watercourse water body permit. Board is to review submission made by the applicant's representative on January 24, 2023, to review and consider a draft resolution of preliminary and conditional final approval, site development plan, a draft resolution of preliminary and final approval of two-lot subdivision, a draft floodplain development permit, and a draft freshwater wetlands watercourse water body permit. So, welcome.
Good evening. Good to see everybody again tonight.
You too.
For the record, Jennifer Gray from Keen and Bean on behalf of the applicant CHI Acquisitions. As you recall, we're seeking the necessary approvals for the construction of a warehouse at the southern end of the Duchess Mall property. Last month, I was not able to be here, but my colleague Rick O'Rourke was here, and your board issued the SECRA negative declaration for the project. We made a submission to the board for this month's meeting that includes a comment response memo, an engineer's cost estimate, and the subdivision plat with the appropriate meets and bounds descriptions on it. We understand that draft resolutions for those 4 permits that the chairman listed have been prepared and circulated for your review tonight. We have had a chance to take a look at those. Debbie kindly sent them along, very timely. And we have 2 comments. One is the resolutions recite 215 parking spaces, but it's actually 209. So on the plans, it shows 209, and the neg deck also recites 209 as well. So that's one edit to make. And then with respect to the site plan resolution, we would note that the maintenance bond as condition 4 of the resolution, that's required under the resolution as drafted to be submitted prior to the chairman signing the site plan, but really the maintenance bond should be required after we receive a CO, and that's the maintenance bond for the landscaping. So typically we wouldn't submit a maintenance bond prior to even starting construction. So I would just ask that that be removed as one of the prerequisites for the signing of the site plan by the chairman. So other than that, we're happy to answer any remaining questions the board may have or its consultants, and otherwise we would ask the board to move forward and hopefully grant approvals tonight.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'll just mention that CPL did not provide a new engineering memo for tonight's meeting because we're really going to focus on the resolutions. So we have 4 draft resolutions that we've mentioned. And so my suggestion is that we go through each one, see if there are questions or comments from board members, and then we'll need separate motions, of course, on each resolution. One additional comment is on all of 4 of the resolutions, I think that the headers and all of the drafts will need to be corrected because they all got kind of discombobulated with the page numbering. So that'll be a technical detail that, that Debbie can take care of. All right, Dominic, if you could begin by reviewing the draft resolution of preliminary and conditional final site development plan approval. And, just kind of summarize the key points of it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I would prefer not to read it verbatim,
Yeah.
given that it is
We
10
might be here
pages,
till 11.
single-spaced. So,
Although this is the longest of the 4, but that's, yeah.
yes.
Don't say that.
Thank you. Thank you. As you sure that you reviewed it, you have seen that the first several pages recite the history of the application and as well as make the findings that are required as a result of the New York State Town Law and Town of Fishkill Code sections relating to site plan development approval. With that said, the board may want to focus on special conditions associated with this particular application. The first special condition relates to outside agency approvals are required. The applicant shall obtain all permits and approvals from all agencies having jurisdiction over the project and provide proof of same to the town of Fishkill. These permits and approvals include conceptual approval from the New York State Department of Transportation for the improvements to Route 9 and/or improvements or construction within the Route 9 right-of-way. Second is approval from the Dutchess County Department of Health for the sanitary sewer and water line improvements. The third is the acceptance of the proposed rerouting of the 20-inch water main from the Village of Fishkill's water operator. And the last is the coverage under the New York State DEC's Speedy's general permit for stormwater discharges. The second special condition is a stormwater maintenance agreement is required that is consistent with town code. And that is, as I'm sure you recall, an agreement that provides that the applicant will maintain the stormwater facilities on their property so that there's no detriment to other properties or stormwater quality. And in their failure to do so, the town has the ability but not the obligation to enter upon the property, do whatever is necessary to maintain stormwater controls, and then most importantly, charge those costs back to the property owner. The third is a performance bond. So this would be a performance bond that is not for the building construction itself, but for certain aspects of the project that could be secured so that they are accomplished in a way that is public-facing and also designed to make sure that there are no elements that are left undone in connection with certain amenities. These include grading, erosion and sediment controls, landscaping, stormwater management improvements, sidewalks, but as I said, do not include building construction. The town code provisions relating to this provide that a performance bond shall be in a form acceptable to the town attorney, and the supporting security shall be in the form of a cash deposit, an assignment of a bank account, or the posting of a letter of credit. The amount of such bond shall be based on an estimate submitted by the applicant, reviewed and approved by the planning board's engineer, and approved by the town board. There is a maintenance bond required, which deals with the maintenance post-issuance of the certificate of occupancy for a period of 1 year to ensure that the landscaping improvements and plantings installed are maintained in a vigorous growing condition. I should note here that there's an error in the underlining, but in addition to that, the amount that has been provided in this particular condition is as I understand it, the entire cost of the installation of all landscaping on site. Number 5 is an inspection fee. There's an inspection fee in the amount of $25,000, which must be submitted to the town for site inspection during construction. Number 6 is strict compliance with the seeker mitigation measures that were identified in the negative declaration that this board adopted last month. There are some final plan revisions, which are standard notes, as well as proof of satisfactory compliance with any outstanding engineering items that Mr. Bodendorf identified in his January 9th memo, which was the last memo on this. There is a special condition that is a limitation of use, which is indicating that the property can only be redeveloped and used for what has been proposed as part of this application, and that if there is any changes to the use in the future, then they would have to come back and apply to the board. There's a limitation on amenities and accessory structures and outdoor fixtures to make sure that only what is shown on the plans is what's allowed for construction. There is a clause regarding binding effect, that this is effective on not only the applicant, but anyone else who may come in and take over the project. There's a requirement that all fees are paid and the escrow deposits are made. There are conditions relating, standard conditions, I might add, relating to landscaping, screening, lighting, and architectural design and details. And there is a requirement that draft reciprocal easement agreements between the project sponsor and adjacent property owners shall be submitted for review and approval. And that pretty much does it for the special conditions for this particular application.
So, well, one thing we'll have to do is see what the board thinks about that maintenance bond section, and if we change that, the applicant has requested that that be prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, I think is what you...
At the same time, yeah, typically once a CO is issued, or, simultaneously with the issuance of a CO, we'll have to post the maintenance bond to make sure that the landscaping that has been planted at that time is maintained in a vigorous growing condition. And that maintenance bond, I think you have it for a one-year term.
So first, let's see what our consultants think about that, and then we'll see what whether board members agree with that. And if we do agree to do it, we'll have to change the sequencing of all of the conditions in, where is that? Kind of in the boldface toward the very end on page 7.
Yep. Or if I could make a suggestion in the, on page 7, that boldface type, you could simply just add, conditions 1 through 9, 13 and 18, with the exception of condition number 4. Maybe that's the path of least resistance.
1 through 3.
Yep, 1 through 3, and then 5 through,
13
yep.
and 18.
That's
Another
how
way to
I've
skin the cat.
redlined it already in anticipation, because to be quite honest, I think that makes perfect sense. So this is a maintenance bond, it's not a construction bond. So posting it, prior to even the commencement of construction would seem unnecessary and would be required as part of the issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
I absolutely agree.
So are board members okay with that, making that change? That that requirement would be prior to issuance of the certificate of occupancy rather than prior to signing of the plans?
And I would indicate that in the special condition itself.
Right.
Yeah.
So that would be on page 4, number 4.
I also made the change in connection with the number of parking spaces.
Right. Let's see, where would we add that notation about prior to certificate of occupancy?
Right at the beginning of number 4, prior to the issuance of any certificate of occupancy, comma, a maintenance bond.
Okay, and then I wanted to go back to number 3, the performance bond. We've had some internal conversations about that and whether an actual amount for the bond should be indicated in the resolution, which is what we have been doing in the past. Now, I'll mention also that the code provision where the authority for the planning board to require performance bonds for site plans was just recently amended so that we used to be doing it for certain site enhancements like landscaping, but now this covers a much broader range of things. And so it's been a little bit different procedure of how we've been handling it. So we did receive an estimate from the applicant's engineers on the total estimated cost of site improvements, site work. And that comes to basically $15,547,936. So it's a large amount, and yet we've been putting a full estimate by the applicants into the resolution, knowing that it actually is ultimately up to the town board to make the determination and approvals of a performance bond. That's the way the code is worded. So I guess I'll just raise the question at this point of should we insert an amount reflecting what the applicant's estimate of the site work is, and then indicating that that amount is subject to the approval of the town board. So that's the question for our consultants and for the applicant. So I'll first turn to John to.
Yeah, the way it's worded in the resolution, putting that amount in, or inserting that amount into that particular condition doesn't equal that that's what the performance bond amount should be. It's simply stating that they submitted an estimate of 15 plus million, which would cover the cost of all the site development minus the building construction, and that we reviewed it and approved it. The actual bond amount is then set by the town board, and that's where I think we need to have probably some additional clarity going forward as to how we potentially reword these, or but I believe that's how we've done it in the past for other site plan approvals. We've included the entire amount, and then the bond gets set by the town board at a lesser number.
Yeah, and I think we may talk about that later on in the meeting for future things and how we should handle them. But for now, I think we should use the approach we've taken in the past to insert the amount as John has suggested. We might want to kind of wordsmith some wording along with that to indicate that that amount is subject to the approval of the town board. If anyone can think of even some additional wording to make it kind of more like the upper limit of the estimate, and that obviously some other number may end up being what is required by the town board for the actual bond amount, and that's in effect what's happened in the last couple of times that this has happened. So, any suggestions? And what's the board's reaction? You probably are like, huh, what's going on here? Yeah, so I mean, I think it's important to put the estimate that was provided by the applicant into the resolution for reference purposes, and then to maybe indicate that that amount certainly is subject to the approval of the town board. So my suggestion would be something like that the applicant shall post with the building department a performance bond or other security in the amount of $15,547,936, subject to the approval of the town board, and then go on from there. That clarifies it a little bit, but if anyone has any further clarification about it, I think this would be the time to suggest it.
Chairman, may I be heard on the matter?
Yeah, sure.
If there's no other board member that wants to weigh in.
Yeah, let me just see if Dominic or John have any suggestions on that, and then I'll let you weigh in. Nothing?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I wrote this provision.
I know you did.
And I wrote it, and it tracks exactly the requirements of the Town of Fishkill Code, Section 150-97D.
it tracks the code, I agree with that. It doesn't necessarily reflect the actual intent of what we're trying to do here, which is what I'm trying to figure out. I'm not trying to figure out the intent, I know the intent. I'm trying to figure out how we can word things so that we'll get the intent.
The process is that the estimate is submitted, it's reviewed by the engineer, and it's approved by the town board. Putting an amount in here, whether it's 15 million, which I believe would be grossly misleading to what is actually being required to be bonded for this particular project, is also inconsistent, and also, it interferes in the town board jurisdictional process, to my opinion. So that's why I wrote it this way. Of course, I only provide advice, and I was asked...
Dominic, could I just say something? What I'm asking you is if you can think of wording that would change your opinion of that, wording that would make it clear that that 15 million plus or minus dollar amount is not necessarily what the bond amount is going to be, but that that is what was submitted by the applicant as the estimated cost of site work, and that there's a reference to that in our resolution, because that's the best place to put references like that, in my opinion.
I understand that's your opinion, Mr. Chairman. I wrote this as best as I could, because I believe that I provided the best legal advice that I could in connection with this matter and how the responsibilities of the various boards are affected.
Would the applicant's attorney like to speak?
Absolutely.
Please.
I would love to. A couple points I'd like to make. One, I serve as board counsel in other jurisdictions similar to Dominic's role. I also obviously serve as the applicant's attorney in many jurisdictions. This is the only community that I've experienced where the planning board itself indicates any amount whatsoever in a resolution. So the procedure is a little bit unusual and one that I frankly haven't encountered yet. I'd also note that in 150-97D, which is the performance bond section in your site plan code, it doesn't provide any authority for the planning board to reference an amount in the resolution. It says that the amount of the bond shall be based on an estimate submitted by the applicant, reviewed and approved by the planning board's engineer, and approved by the town board. So I would suggest in the first instance that I don't think it would be appropriate to put an amount in the resolution. If you are going to put an amount in the resolution, I would note that the estimate that was provided includes all site improvements. That includes mostly, if not all, private site improvements, whereas under the New York State town law, these site plan statutes and the subdivision statutes only provide for the bonding of public improvements. So the difference being, if you think of a traditional, residential subdivision, right, that includes new roadways, new water mains, sewer mains, those public improvements, the roadways, the water mains, the sewer mains, those would be bonded through a performance bond, because you don't want to end up in a situation where a homeowner, buys a lot, and then all of a sudden the developer walks away and leaves that homeowner without a way to get to their lot, because the roads haven't been constructed, without a way to have water and sewer service, because the mains haven't been installed. So the town would have that money in its possession, that you can call upon the bond, the letter of credit, what have you, to go ahead and make those improvements if the developer defaults and walks away. Site plans are a little different, right, because it's private property. None of the property is being dedicated to the town. None of it is being turned over as public property. It's all private property. So I think that we have a distinction there. So I would submit that the estimate that was provided, yes, includes all of the site work, but it's all private site work. I think the exception is the DOT, right, the New York State Route 9 improvements, but those improvements are going to be bonded separately with New York State DOT pursuant to their permit process. So I frankly don't think there are any public improvements here to be bonded. With that said, in some municipalities, I have seen things like stormwater and landscaping subject to a performance bond, things that if the developer were to walk away with those things half done, those might cause some outward impacts to adjacent properties. But I would suggest that demolition and a lot of the other grading work, a lot of the categories of things, we submitted a comprehensive estimate to include, all of the work minus the building construction. But that was not a concession on our part that all of these things are subject to performance bonding under New York State law. So I think I'll rest there. But I would ask, I'm sorry, just one other thing I wanted to mention.
Go ahead.
If I could. With respect to language in the resolution, if you are going to include an amount, one way that you could do it is just to simply state, as a matter of fact, without any recommendation or any qualification, just a matter of fact that the engineer's cost estimate submitted by the applicant was in the amount of X dollars. And then leave it to the recommendation of the planning board's engineer as per code and the town board as per code to determine, based on this cost estimate, what the eventual amount will be.
See, that's the kind of wording I was looking for. Because that way you get to reference the amount of the estimate, be very clear as you're saying that an estimate was provided by the applicant's engineer in the amount of blank, and that amount will be considered and is subject to the approval of the town board. Seems pretty simple to me.
Is it against the policy of the town, though?
I believe that's exactly the policy of the town.
Okay.
If you read, again, the code provision says, the amount of such bond shall be based on an estimate, or in this case, the estimate submitted by the applicant, reviewed and approved by the planning board's engineer, which is what John Bodendorf did, and approved by the town board, which is what will happen. It sounds exactly consistent to me with the town's policy as stated in the code, by wording it the way we're talking about.
So we're going to make this SOP from now on?
Well, and I think we're going to talk about it a little bit more later on in the meeting. So, but for this resolution, we do need to do something now. So I like that wording. And what does the board think?
I'm fine with that wording. It accomplishes the same thing that the original condition was trying to get at, so.
Yeah.
And it incorporates the number, sorry.
It's just, I think, stating the matter of fact.
What do you think, Robbie? Any thoughts, Bob? So that way it avoids any perception that the bond is actually going to be 15 plus or minus $1 million, because I mean, that's not realistic. But yet there was an estimate submitted, so all the time we're putting in information in a resolution which talks about things like that. Jody, what do you think? Any thoughts?
I think we need it. I think however you word it, people do start projects and then they don't finish them. And who's going to clean stuff up if it doesn't go through? That's my only thing. That money needs to be there.
Yeah.
I would suggest on that point, and maybe you can talk about this later too, an avenue for that concern would actually not be a performance bond, but for private improvements like this, but a restoration bond so that if you do end up with a site like this and the developer walks away, that money would be used by the municipality to make sure that the site is secure, it's safe, and it's not causing external impacts. But obviously, if this developer were to walk away, halfway through construction, I don't think the town is going to go in and build a warehouse, right? That's not in the, the town isn't in the business of building warehouses. But what the town would be interested in doing is making sure that the site is safe and secure.
And that's our problem that we ran into.
Yeah.
So that's why this is all going on now.
Yeah, so I think maybe the better vehicle, if that is your concern, is a restoration bond.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, I'll bring it up then. Do we want to consider a condition that says the blasting will not occur on this site? I mean, we had a project that was recently approved where we didn't believe blasting was going to occur, and it did. It affected some residents. Is that an appropriate item to broach here? Because we weren't expecting it on the other project. Not that it's likely here, but sorry for throwing that
I think we have heard from the applicant that blasting was not planned for this site work.
We've heard that.
Yeah, we've heard it before. So, yeah, I mean, that's
the discussion point.
It's a good question.
Counsel?
I already provided advice in connection with this. I mean, you can change this resolution and this particular condition any which way you would like to change it. The language that I provided tracks exactly the town code requirements.
Now, the question that Anthony was bringing up was about blasting during construction on the site, not having to do with the performance bond, but whether there should be a condition indicating.
No, I understand what Anthony's, but that is also, I mean, there's nothing in here about blasting. Blasting is within the purview of the building inspector.
So I would request that the board not put an absolute condition in the resolution. We don't anticipate any blasting. That's based on all of the work that's been done so far. This is a developed site. I don't believe we're doing any basement, right? We don't anticipate blasting here. But I would ask that the board not include an absolute condition that there shall be no blasting. Perhaps that there shall be no blasting without receiving the necessary permits and approvals from the town. I believe that there are standards in place in your code, and that's administered by the building department.
That's a good point, but it's another conversation.
I think our attorney has made the point that it is, blasting would be of the purview of the building inspector, and I think it's important that that's made clear. I just brought it up because it was an issue that has recently come to my attention, but after hearing the explanation, I don't believe we need the condition, but important to highlight that that does come from the building inspector, if granted.
And thanks for bringing it up. I think it's an important issue, and it's one that I think the town is going to need to think about for the future.
And we could talk about it as a board later.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we have this resolution pretty well set to go with the suggested revisions. So we're talking about the modification in number 3, where we're saying that the, let's see, what was the wording we came up with? I didn't really write it down. Did you write anything down? All right, let's figure it out
An
again.
estimate was provided by the applicant's engineer, and that's as far as I got.
In the amount of $15,547,936. From there, where did we go?
I just don't know how to reword the rest of that.
Something like that. That amount will be forwarded to the town board.
I would ask that, so I don't know if, and maybe Mr. Bodendorf can weigh in on this, but I don't know that Mr. Bodendorf has approved that number. I know it's, in the code, it says it's to be reviewed and approved by the planning board's engineer. We haven't received any notification that that's been reviewed and approved. That is the estimate, as I mentioned, that is the estimate that was submitted, but it is in no means meant to be the estimate upon which the performance bond is based. It was a comprehensive estimate of all site work on the property, but not an indication of the basis for which we would be proposing as the performance bond. And I think we'd welcome the opportunity to have Mr. Bodendorf's office review that.
Well, I
before
think
it's
from what we've
indicated that
heard,
that is the amount.
Mr. Bodendorf has reviewed it. The word approve is kind of a tricky one, and it's in the code, but it's not really clear what that means. So,
Yeah,
I would just say that, based on my review of their estimate, I found it to be appropriate for what they were estimating. The performance bond, however, whatever that number ends up being should not equate to what that estimate was.
So why do we even have it then?
well, I think I explained why I think
I know,
we should have
I
it.
understand that, but I'm going back to the engineer.
I didn't write the code, Fred.
All right, give me a minute, and I guess I'm going to have to do it myself. But I'll come up with some wording. Does anyone want to take a break for 5 minutes and come back when I'm done? Let's do that. We are officially taking a 5-minute break, folks.
When you're ready.
Is Jody outside?
She just stepped out to the restroom real quick.
All right. All right. I want to wait till Jody gets back. So just give us one more second here. All right, here we go. Okay, we are back in order. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so I have some language for number 3, the performance bond requirement. So the suggestion is to keep the first sentence as is in its entirety, starting with that the applicant shall post the performance bond, et cetera, all the way through what those site improvements are, but not including building construction. Then we'll add wording to this effect. The applicant's engineer has submitted an estimate of the overall costs of site work in the amount of $15,547,936. The planning board engineer has reviewed that estimate, and the estimate will be forwarded to the town board for the town board's consideration, approval, and determination of an amount for the performance bond. And then continue with the rest of the wording as it was.
Would you like a second on that, Mr. Chair?
Well, I think we just need a consensus that that's what we're going to be voting on, because we still have to vote on the resolution. If anyone
I have no
has-
changes to that.
I'm okay with it.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. And John, that's okay with you?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Dominic, any thoughts?
No, sir.
Okay, let's do it. So I think we talked about the other modifications in the resolution. So are we ready to consider approval of the resolution?
Yes.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve and adopt the resolution of preliminary and conditional final approval for the proposed site development plan located at 415, 453 US Route 9, submitted by CHI Acquisitions LP as reviewed and revised tonight, and to authorize the chair to sign it?
So moved.
Anthony moves it. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Fred seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that passes. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we're probably going to be able to move a little bit quicker at this point on with the additional resolution. So Dominic, would you please go through them?
The next one would be the subdivision approval, would be my recommendation. This is for a two-lot subdivision, which was part of the application. And it is fairly standard. The special conditions are also standard conditions and track the prior approval for site development plan. Specifically for here, they have to sign the owner's consent block. They have to show compliance with the resolution of any concerns by the planning board engineer. That they have to obtain all the permits and approvals, which we previously discussed for site development plan approval. They have to submit a amended reciprocal easement for the subdivision to the attorney for review and approval. They have to add an approval block for the planning board chair to sign, and they have to reimburse all costs associated with the review of the subdivision.
Okay. Any questions or comments from board members?
No.
And anything from the applicant's team?
No comments.
All right. Could we have a motion to approve and adopt the resolution of preliminary and conditional final subdivision approval for the...
I'll make that motion.
Okay. I'll just continue with the wording of the two-lot subdivision located at 415, 453 US Route 9, submitted by CHI Acquisitions LP, as reviewed and revised tonight, and to authorize the chair to sign it. Fred moves it. Is there a second?
Second.
Robbie seconds it. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes 7-0. All right, moving on, let's do the floodplain development permit.
You know, I opened up the other one.
Okay.
No, that's quite all right.
Whichever one you'd like.
Yep, floodplain development permit approval. Once again, it recites the history of the application. The special requirements as far as conditions for this is that all work shall be conducted in accordance with the approved plans and the stormwater pollution prevention plan. Prior to commencement of any work on site, they do have to obtain coverage under the New York State DEC Speedy's general permit for stormwater discharges. They also have to employ the services of a licensed professional engineer to conduct periodic inspections during the course of all work within the area of the special flood hazard and the engineer shall, upon the completion of that work, certify to the town that the work was conducted in full conformance with the terms and conditions outlined herein. They also have to submit as-built drawings after construction to ensure that the structures and all final grading were completed in accordance with the approved design plans. They also have to submit certification for the as-built elevation of the lowest floor of each structure constructed on site. The town of Fishkill also reserves the right to rescind or otherwise withdraw approval in the event that the project sponsor fails to conduct or complete the work required under this permit. And the planning board authorizes the building inspector to act on its behalf as the local administrator going forward and to conduct periodic inspections throughout the placement of fill and site stabilization to monitor compliance with this permit. These are standard conditions contained in the town's zoning code and floodplain development requirements.
Okay, any questions from board members?
No.
And from the applicant's attorney?
I think Debbie probably already has this, but the 215 parking spaces to reduce that down to 209.
And inserting the,
The date.
well, we didn't get to the next
obviously.
one, but yes.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So are we ready for a motion to approve and adopt the resolution for floodplain development permit approval for the proposed development that we've been talking about, as reviewed and revised tonight, and to authorize the chair to sign it?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Anthony moves it. Is there a second?
Second.
Bob seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes 7-0. And that brings us to the last one on freshwater wetlands, et cetera.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This one also has the 215 standard parking spaces, so that will need to be revised. And this resolution also makes the findings in connection with the proposed activities and related wetland impacts associated with the project. And it also contains almost exactly the exact same special permit conditions that were outlined in the floodplain development permit.
All right, any questions or comments on that one?
No.
All right, are we ready for a motion on this one to approve and adopt the resolution for freshwater wetlands watercourse water body permit approval? And as reviewed and revised tonight, and to authorize the chair to sign it?
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Anthony moves it. Is there a second?
Second.
Jody seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes 7-0. So it looks like we're all set.
Thank you very much for your discussion tonight and for your time throughout the review of this application. We very much appreciate it.
Well, thanks to the applicant team for making it as smooth a process as it could have been, I think.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the Appalachian View 4-lot subdivision. Board to review application and supporting documentation that was accepted and referred at the January 12th, 2023 Planning Board meeting. Welcome, Mr. Burns.
Good evening.
Would you just kindly remind the board a little bit about the proposed subdivision?
The proposed subdivision is a 10.05 acre parcel along the south side of Smithtown Road, about 500 feet west of Cedar Hill Road. It's also north of Hoos Boulevard. The proposal's for 4 lots served by wells and on-site sewage disposal systems. Lot 1 will have an individual driveway, while it's proposed for lots 2, 3, and 4 to have a shared common driveway. There's some small wetlands on the site that we've kept our distance away from. It's less than an acre of, freshwater town wetlands. There's 2 existing wells on site, lots 1 and 4, that were tested and approved back for a previous owner's proposal. We've worked on, our next submission will include some site distance profiles and, the adjacent buildings and stuff for the board's information. We meet our current driveways locations meet the AASHTO standards for site distance. We've also have review comments from John, and we've reviewed them, and we don't really have too much to say, except that we can easily make some changes to the plan to more conform to what John's looking for, with some sweeping turns in the driveway and show some site distance. One of the proposed changes that could be made was to look into bringing the common driveway out onto Smithtown on the opposite side of the property, on where lot 4 comes up and connects to the road. That actually becomes impractical due to site distance, because the location that's been chosen for the driveways is actually the crest of the hill on Smithtown Road. So you get if you go to the other location, you're going down the slope, and what happens is you end up with about 150 feet of site distance in the one direction, which kind of makes it subpar.
So you're going straight out with the driveway then, instead of curving down?
Excuse me?
Common driveway?
Yes.
Going to go straight out?
No, the straight out is the bad site distance.
Okay.
Well, the site distance isn't as good.
This is the safer version.
Yeah, just to clarify that comment, the way it reads is that consideration should be given if site distance could be improved in that location, and if it can't, which it sounds like it obviously can't, then they should not consider it. So, but it's one of the reasons why we asked them to put the actual site distance measurements on the plan, so that it's clear that they're using the best locations for their driveway entrances.
Since we're talking about the driveways, so I understand that the code requirements are that common driveways are normally to serve up to 3 lots. But there are times when the planning board does have the authority to increase that to 4 or up to 5, based on site conditions and things like site distance on the road. So is that something that might be considered, as simply to combine, all 4 of the lot driveways into one at least going right out to the road?
I did look at that briefly, and I think that there's an opportunity to do that probably right in between where the 2 driveways are now is probably the most ideal spot. I pulled a couple site distance lines from different locations to try to get the best location, and I think that actually when you get right in between them is a little bit better than on either side of it.
So let's get the site distance analysis in shape, and then maybe see if the owner applicant is willing to consider the combining into 4. So that would be acceptable? Okay, well, that's good to hear. Okay, well, should we have Mr. Bodendorf go through CPL's engineering memo? Not in a lot of detail, but just hit some of the highlights.
Yeah, I'll be brief. As far as seeker goes, it's our opinion that the project can be classified as an unlisted action. We identified a couple of items in the EAF that just need to be looked at and completed. Our general comments are generally about the regulatory approvals that are needed from the health department, the need for a basic SWIP since the amount of disturbance exceeds an acre, having a common driveway easement and maintenance agreement, and eventually providing meets and bounds descriptions of the common driveway easement and the lot descriptions. On the plans, there are a number of these comments are just housekeeping. There are some inconsistencies with some of the areas that are described. We want more information about what's going to remain and what's going to be removed. We asked for a legend. We asked for the zoning conformance table to be expanded to include additional information. The grading plan didn't really show any proposed grading, so we asked them to take another look at that. We already talked about the site distance stuff, so I won't go over that again. We just want to make sure that on the common driveway, the common portions are shown at the correct width of 18 feet, and then the individual parts need to be 12 feet wide. And all driveways that are over 250 feet length require a pull-off area that needs to be a minimum of 20 feet wide for a distance of 25 feet. So we'd like to see those on the next submission as well. Mr. Burns mentioned they're going to be providing profiles and additional details, so we look forward to seeing that. We asked for some more information on the proposed use of rain gardens on the site, and also asked for additional information on the erosion and sediment control plan. That's essentially it.
As far as the common driveway goes at 20 feet, is that a 20-foot wide section in lieu of the 18-foot wide, so it's only 2 feet wider, or is that a?
No. It needs to be a minimum of 18 feet wide. If you're already showing it at that, just provide a dimension.
The pull-offs for passing, I think it said it was 20 feet wide for, I forget what the, I'll take a look at it.
It's in the code, but yeah, that would be in addition to so you'd have your 18-foot wide section. Well, the common portion probably won't, actually it will, because you're serving those 3 lots. So yeah, it would be 18 feet and then 20 feet beside that.
Seems, okay.
That's 38 feet wide. A blacktop in that particular area?
That's what the code requires.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
Is that on both sides of the road, John?
No,
Just one?
one, yeah.
Perhaps.
Any other questions?
Well, perhaps since we're talking about things like that, maybe some additional coordination and communication between our engineer and the applicants might be appropriate at this point. So maybe we should get authorization from the board for that to happen. Would someone like to make a motion to that effect to allow the consultants, our consultant engineer and the applicants engineer to communicate with each other?
I'll make a motion.
All right, Fred moves that. Is there a second?
Hey, guys at that end, wake up.
I second.
Robbie seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any
Thank you.
opposed? Any abstentions? That passes. All right, so hopefully you can straighten out some of those kind of technical questions and issues.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, I believe I misspoke. The 20-foot width would be the total width of the, so where you have 18 feet, it would just be an additional 2 feet. Where you have 12 feet, it would be an additional 8 feet.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
I also plan on showing more adequate turnarounds at each one of the rear houses there, so that, you know, that once an emergency vehicle does get in there, that there is somewhere for them to go without
Yeah.
without reversing all the way out.
Yeah. Good. Any questions from board members?
No, I mean, the emergency access and turnarounds was my key point, and it's been hit upon, and also the single driveway entrance was something else that I wanted to see, which
Okay.
seems to be now taking place, so no other comment.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on leach fields. It's difficult to appreciate the relief on this lot from this particular map. Even the lot that shows the relief on, the map that shows the relief on it, I'm concerned about, and I'm sure you've considered, the distance between, excuse me, the wetlands and the pond and the leach fields,
Yes.
and the grade
Yes.
associated with that, because the grade is real steep back there.
I'm very familiar with the site and everything, and the locations of where the septics have been chosen. I went out there and located those wetland flags, so I've been all through that area.
Yeah, this would be a site I would highly recommend board members go to and do a little quick walking around and see what the site actually looks like. Some of us who were here when the previous application was in have already done that, but I wouldn't actually mind going back out myself and refreshing my memory about it.
We also, one of John's comments was a road name for the common driveway, and we think it would be appropriate to have something along the lines of Appalachian View is our private road name.
Appalachian View. Would it need any kind of like court or lane or anything like that?
Just Appalachian View.
Appalachian View. Okay.
Did you fill in the pool yet?
Yes.
No, well, if you take it out, we should.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they've started to, they've done a pretty good job at cleaning up the site. I have to go over there and actually double check to take the various sheds and stuff that have been removed off the site, off the existing condition survey.
Okay. So I think maybe at the first meeting, we might have mentioned the town's aquifer protection overlay zone. And so that's something we'll have to look at further as we get into the project review, where because there are requirements in that recently enacted law by the town board, which is now in our code, that the site may be subject to special regulations because there would not be public water or public sewer, and that lots may be subject to the maximum residential density of 120,000 square feet. But there is a provision in there where the planning board can issue a special use permit to address sites like this where there may be extenuating circumstances to allow, or in effect to override the requirements of the regulations, which would allow basically the lot sizes that are being proposed here.
Yes.
So that's something that we'll have to also take into consideration. Yeah, we talked about the possible steepness of the site. Let's go out and take a look at that. And I forget if I mentioned this at the last meeting, but the site is actually in a county agricultural district, Dutchess County 22, which is interesting because there's really no agricultural use around it, but
It used to.
there used to be, right?
There used to be 2 farms.
Yeah, yeah.
I live on one of them.
At any rate, the applicant may need to submit an agricultural data statement, which is a pretty basic thing to do, as I'm sure you've done before for certain
Yes.
projects. So basically, you should do that for your next submission. Just fill it in and send it in to the planning office, and then we're supposed to, I guess, distribute it to certain places which aren't really looking at them anymore.
We know that now, don't we?
Yeah, they tried doing that.
We were told that way.
Yeah, anyway, that's another story.
Yep.
But the requirement is simply to submit the ag data statement, that's all.
Just got to send it in, whether anybody ever looks at it, doesn't matter.
We will look at it. Yeah, I was just going to mention, so, yeah, I appreciate all the comments that CPL has put together. It's quite a laundry list of things, although a lot of them are fairly straightforward. Some may be a little more than others, but just, our request is that all the pieces be submitted at one time so that we're not looking at, piecemeal submissions. And
Yes.
once we get the full submission, then we can, start considering whether a public hearing can be held and seeker determinations and all that good stuff. In this case, though, it does not have to be submitted to the county for a GML review because it's a subdivision, and the county has stated that they are not reviewing subdivisions anymore under the general municipal law provisions. All right. So I think in CPL's memo, John has suggested that this could be classified as an unlisted action. And so I'll turn to Dominic and see if you concur on that.
I do.
All right. And so, so then with an application like this, I suppose the board could treat this as an uncoordinated review. It's a town road, so the state DOT isn't really involved in it. The health department is, but I think the health department has pretty much said they don't really need or want to be considered, early in the process, although I'm sure we've already, I think, referred it to them as part of the acceptance package, but I guess I'm just looking for input as to whether we might be able to treat this as an uncoordinated environmental review as opposed to a coordinated review.
There's no requirement to do a coordinated review for this application.
So I think what we'll do is we'll see if the planning board members have any questions about that, but I think we'll go ahead and propose a motion to classify the proposed Appalachian View 4-lot subdivision as an unlisted action, and if the board concurs to treat this as an uncoordinated environmental review pursuant to seeker. If somebody would make that motion, then that will lock that up.
Then I'll make the motion.
All right, thanks, Anthony. Is there a second?
Second.
Bob seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so that passes 7-0. So anything else we need to talk about tonight? Any questions, Mr. Burns?
I think that I'm all set. I can, get these changes to you and get everything together and get it back to you.
Okay. So if you're going to try to shoot for the March 9th meeting, what is our submission date, Debbie?
2 weeks.
February 22nd.
22nd.
Wednesday.
Oh, yeah, because it's 28 days, and, yeah. All right.
All right. Have a good
Okay.
evening.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? I know I probably outlined, but if we have questions about this project, will there be a public hearing or something, or will we be able to
Yes,
ask that?
sure. There'll be a public hearing.
And we'll get
Probably, it won't be at the next meeting, but it will probably be, a couple of meetings from now.
Okay, I just didn't know how that worked.
Yeah, and then,
That's part of the process, yeah.
Okay.
right, and the public hearing notice will be posted actually on the property. So there'll be a sign posted there, and then also the public hearing notice is supposed to be sent to neighboring landowners within 500 feet
Correct.
of the application.
Yeah, because we got a notice about this meeting tonight, so that's why we were here.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what we didn't know. Okay,
Oh, well, thank you very much for coming.
thank you.
Hopefully you learned something about the application.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was a good.
All right, so our final application tonight is Westage Self-Storage Site Development Plan and Freshwater Wetlands Watercourse Water Body Permit. Board to review submission made by the applicant's representative on January 25, 2023. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. Karen Lobruto, Labella Associates, here representing the applicant. So we listened to the comments at the last meeting and are here presenting our revised concept. We've pulled it totally out of the watercourse buffer. We don't have any grading there. We don't have any stormwater outlet there. We've also shrunk the footprint. The actual footprint is 17,000 or so square feet. The full development is 75,000 or so square feet, down from 93,000. We've also reduced our encroachment into the rear yard, and now are only asking for a variance of 13.2 feet. And so the way that we've done this is that we've reoriented the building to have the entrances on the eastern side predominantly. We've also revised the stormwater so that it's a stormwater planter as opposed to the bioretention ponds. And so that's allowed us to, again, stay out of the watercourse buffer, which we understood was incredibly important to you all. And we've shortened the retaining wall as well. In general, we've reduced asphalt by 27%. I guess other than that, I would just point out that the third and fourth floor overhang the parking, but there's approximately 20-foot clearance between the pavement and that third floor. Open it up to questions.
Before we go around the board for questions, I had a couple of things I wanted to ask about. One, I know you haven't really worked out the stormwater management details yet, but I wonder if you could kind of briefly describe what the intended function of the bioretention areas and the stormwater planter area are, how they would function.
Sure. So the bioretention areas are essentially graded areas where the water filters. The water is graded by way of the site design. The water travels towards those bioretention areas, and it attenuates the speed of them, slows it down so that it percolates into the ground. I'd have to get back to you as to whether those have a treatment function or not. We will be submitting the stormwater pollution prevention plan, which will have all that detail. And then I can speak to you in detail about the stormwater planters. So what it is that it's built up against the wall of the building. It uses the foundation, which would be waterproof. It's got an 18-inch wall that surrounds it on the I-84 side. The bottom of it is mulch, and then there's a fabric with a soil medium, and then there would be plants, which are DEC-approved stormwater plants for this function. And then it drains into a centralized catch basin at the bottom, and then it drains out towards, it drains out here, and then it discharges kind of just over land prior to going into the watercourse buffer there.
So it's a little bit more formal in functioning than your typical rain garden, which would be smaller, but the function is intended to retain and sort of disperse water. I guess one of my questions really has to do with how, will these facilities really help in ways to mitigate potential flooding on the site?
I mean, I guess I'm not sure that stormwater management practices are ever intended to exactly mitigate flooding as much as they are. I mean, they are in that they're attenuating the flow, but it's also about treatment. It's about reducing, right, the peak flows from the current condition and reducing that peak flow as a requirement by the state, and then also treating the water. As far as what we had before, which was the bioretention basin in this place, and its, I guess, facility for capturing flood waters off of the water course. I mean, really, it's all related to how it was graded, right? And I'm not clear that, I'd have to get back to you on that, but I'm not clear that it's graded to function to accept water from the water course. I think it's graded to function to accept water from the building. And in this case, this planter is meant to accept water from the building. That's sheet flowing off of the building. And the bioretention areas and the rest of the site are designed to capture what's coming off of the site.
Okay, well, I think that answers my question, because again, I understand that the stormwater management plan will be worked out in more detail, but
yes,
I was just sort of curious as to what the overall intent was.
Okay.
And then also, I was just wondering that you indicated that the revised plans would eliminate all watercourse buffer disturbance, which I think is very good. The proposed box culvert spanning the wetland crossing would, of course, encroach on the portion of the wetland, which is by nature of the fact that the wetland is there and it will cross, over or through the wetland. But so I'm just wondering if you could just comment briefly on how the impacts of the wetland would be minimized with this crossing.
Well, in fact, there are no impacts to the wetland. There's not temporary impacts or permanent impacts. The box culvert crosses it in its entirety, and its construction and installation won't result in temporary impacts. As far as impacts to the wetland over the course of construction, that's what the stormwater prevention plan is designed to prohibit, essentially.
Mm-hmm. So I think maybe at one point early on in the process that you might have mentioned the possibility of a small bridge instead of the box culvert. Is that still something that you're thinking about, or would that have any different kinds of benefits or impacts overall for the site? What's your thought on that at this point?
My understanding, actually, from speaking with our biologists over the course of several projects, is that box culverts are preferred in terms of their ability to reduce impacts from construction, because the bridge, of course, requires abutments. And depending on where those go, generally speaking, it involves at least some amount of temporary impact, whereas the box culvert does not. And I can't give any more detail than that, but certainly we can try and address this further in our response for the March meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Sure.
Just providing some additional
Yep.
idea of how that would work. Okay. So why don't we go to board members for questions?
I was just curious, where does it empty? Where does this wetland, where does that, goes under 84? Where does it go?
Yeah, I think that the drainage does, it travels under 84 is what I understood. The wetland is very much the result of outlet here, a stormwater outlet here, just, where that Spring Hill Suites Hotel is. If you go out there, you see it. It's just it's a big pipe, and it's just opening out onto the site. So has a large part of what, is creating the wetland there, along with, the depressions.
I'm sorry, is that coming in or going out?
It's coming,
I thought that was coming in from there.
the wetland is obviously a production of many issues, right? But there is water coming from Spring Hill Suites through the stormwater outlet that is essentially exacerbating that wetland, if not the predominant reasoning. The water course, of course, is coming, from east along. The water course was, was engineered back
So
in.
eventually gets to it's going into Fishkill Creek?
I don't want to speak too concretely on
that's
that
curious.
at this point.
I would assume it does. I would assume that.
I hate assumptions.
I do too, but it would make sense.
Well, so we can get more information on that.
Sure. So you want to know the drainage of the water course? Yes. Yes.
Just repeat what he said.
Sure. So as I just mentioned, this water course is not, the site did not look like this originally. The water course that you see making this L here is the product of engineering. In fact, there was an easement granted to re-engineer that water course back in 1929. And it's very obvious on the historical aerials, which were submitted to you guys as part of our SHPO submittal. And so again, this just adds to the comments that we've made in the past, that the site has been incredibly disturbed over the last several decades.
So, Mr. Chair, I took the liberty of looking at the FEMA flood map for this area. And the
Okay.
entire site is within the FEMA special flood hazard area. And the Clove Creek is a regulated floodway as per the FEMA flood map. And the elevation I saw on the FEMA flood map, which is available online, showed elevation at 211. And so 2 corners of the building are shown below 211, although the FFE is shown as 213. They're also filling with outside of the 30-foot watercourse buffer, but they are still filling within the property many areas that are below elevation 211. So I have a concern that over the years, when large storms come through, where is that water going? It's going to the lowest areas. So if you're raising the lowest parts of the site and you're putting a building there, well, when those large storms come through, where is that water going? And the applicant has not, at this point, explained that to this board of where would that water go? Well, it's got to go somewhere. Will it affect other properties? Has there been an evaluation of this? None of this has been done to date. Now, I do appreciate the work outside of the 30-foot watercourse buffer, but that does not necessarily mean that this project will not have an adverse impact on wetlands or floodplains. And until that has been demonstrated, that's how I...
So basically, the question is, can you provide, along with whatever stormwater management report you're going to be doing, but basically like an overall drainage analysis similar to what Anthony is talking about, so that we could get a better idea of how the water systems in that area work?
Yeah, we're not, so it's Neil Alexander, Cuddy and Fader on behalf of the applicant. We're not adverse to that. We understand the question. I think what I also need to mediate is, as you know, 1987, there was a full environmental impact statement and findings and a site plan approval that was granted for all 10 lots. Actually, Lot 9 is the pond. Lot 10 is now built as Toll Brothers. That didn't get a site plan approval. And if you track all the history back and forward, even when you subdivided this lot, there was shown 140 key hotel with grading
on Lot 6B. Now, that was not given its formal approval. If you read the negative declaration that was adopted for the subdivision of 6A and the site plan approval for 6A for the medical office building, it said, before we will allow a subdivision of this property, we have to make sure that it is developable. And that's why grading plans and analysis was done, and those plans are on file with you. And so what I'm just trying to balance out here is, and I hear what you're saying, and we're not saying no, we're not fighting with you. As you can see, we keep evolving the plan, right? But help us, our clients here, they're spending a lot of money. We comply with you, it's an Army Corps wetland in the front, and we're complying with the Army Corps standards in order to get a nationwide permit for that box culvert. Now, whether a box culvert, we don't even need a nationwide, excuse me, I thought we had a little, right, because the box culvert has no disturbance, right. Thank you, as opposed to the abutments when we had talked about that. So it's an Army Corps wetland in the front. We're not disturbing that, and that's their jurisdiction. We've gotten better because we've reoriented the entrance to the side, which is not great for us as a business opportunity, but we're doing that. And as a result of that, we have nothing with regard to that 30-foot setback, which 30-foot setback, by the way, has existed in your code since at least 2001. So that when the 2006 subdivision was done, that code provision existed, and in fact, I didn't see a variance or a waiver in the approvals for 2006 for the medical office building, but the waterway keeps going, and the grading for the parking on the west side of that property is probably within 30 feet. What I want to balance out here is, just because we're last doesn't mean we should fix everyone else's problems when we are abiding by all the code provisions and balancing it well. And look, you know, the planter in the back is so that way we don't have a direct discharge disturbance associated with the 30-foot area, and that's why we're using that BMP, right? As opposed to having, you know, a pipe that would leave a basin as it normally happens, and then you'd have disturbance within 30 feet. So that's why we're doing that, because we're trying to honor your request. So how do we balance this with a reasonable understanding that it doesn't require us to essentially fix hydrology that's the result of disturbances going back as far as 1929, where I found an encumbrance on our property of an easement that was given to redo the Clove Creek. And then DOT, remember, took a lot of that property for the clover leaf. You know, and on top of that, there was also an easement given to Dutchess County for the predecessor road to Interstate 84. So that stream area has been disturbed, come back, been disturbed, come back, and that continues to be the case. So a lot of this is how far do we revisit onto this one little lot can only do so much as far as fixing things. And we had a reasonable basis that there was a neg deck and an approval and drawing showing grading for a 140-key hotel on here. And I think we're doing a lot better than having a 140-key hotel as far as traffic, water, stormwater, wastewater, and so forth. So we're trying, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to speak to that. How do we scope what your ask is to more of an understanding than it becoming incumbent on us to fix everything? And I hope you took that in the spirit of collaboration that I'm.
Yeah, well, I think the intent, at least in the first place, would be to provide whatever documentation you can to answer, you know, the questions that we're posing tonight.
Yeah, and I'll just say, we're not trying to keep that documentation from you. It's more that we need to finalize a concept before it makes sense to go into all the detailed calculations and all grading and all of the rest of it. You know, we can't start that work until we really know that we have a sound start.
Right, right.
And I'm not implying that the property is undevelopable, but to say it's a reference in 1987 neg deck for this site today, when hydraulic conditions have changed, is also not fair either. And I just think the exploration and the documentation.
It was a POS deck in 1987, neg deck in 2006.
So a pause deck meant that there was some significant, potentially significant impacts.
Yeah, because there was 140 acres, the entire Westage site was being master.
You're going to have to use the mic because we're recording.
Yeah, you're talking about the overall environmental impact statement for the business part.
I mean,
which-
that is certainly a starting point. I mean, it's certainly valuable information, but I'm not sure that,
Was that a generic EIS or a full-fledged EIS?
It was a regular EIS, and it came with an approval for 140,000 square feet of development on 6A, on 6, excuse me.
Yeah.
6 was then split into 6A and 6B. 6A took, I think, 57,000 square feet of it. There's 83,000 square feet remaining, which is our investment-backed expectation, right? Because it's been on a filed map that's been changed 4 times, 7912, A, B, C, and D. And these are the plans that were submitted that got the approval in 2006. That's the office building and the hotel. And they're signed by the town.
So-
These aren't just plan sets.
Yeah, no.
You know.
not disputing that
We
either.
definitely have done our homework on this.
So you have to understand that even some of us old-timers who have been on the board for a while weren't even here for those. So it's got to be an educational experience for all of us.
We're not fighting that.
Yeah.
And obviously, we've, took the time to educate ourselves as well. I just, my concern is as we turn, first of all, Karen said, yes, what I'm trying to triangulate is we need to get a sense of that we're on the right path in order to continue spending money to get to to give you more information, right? I also am concerned that as we offer to try and help and we start analyzing these things, that all of a sudden how much gets put on us to fix that we can't necessarily fix. And then all of a sudden we can't get anything on here and we have a regulatory taking, right? Because someone says, well, I don't know. And I want to avoid that. I want to, we're trying to use we're using 79,000 of the 83,000 square feet, right, that's allocated to us. And
75.
sorry,
Just-
thank you.
just
No.
to keep the record straight.
No, thank you. So I think that's what we're trying to do is if you track it all the way through, we're moving consistent with all those prior approvals and they've moved through the ages. And, there's a note on the plan, note 34, it says that 6B was not approved as is, but we can't subdivide it. Literally, if you read the meeting minutes, you read the neg deck, you read the approval for that subdivision, it says it over and over and over, and there are actually memos back and forth between the engineer for the applicant at that time and the engineer for the town, John Andrews at that time, about basically saying, I can't let my board approve this if this isn't actually developable. So you need to give me grading drawings, you need to give me these things. And so we moved up based on those investment-backed expectations to acquire the property, that there is something that's, doable out here.
So let me get, well, first of all, to see if the board members have any more specific questions, but then I also wanted to get a sense around the board as to what your general observations are on the revised plan that's before us. So I think that's going to be key to our, to moving forward with this. So anyone want to start? Fred, how about you? Any thoughts?
No, I'm just confused, it's a tough lot. It's a real tough lot, and we asked to go up, we asked to, do anything to get out of the water, out of the direct water. I don't know what you do about the extra, maybe 5 feet you gotta go up, I don't, that makes it difficult, because that's a building expense to get out of the water. But again, I've been in this area, and I know that, we've had lots of flooding. We still have the problem with flooding off the Fishkill Creek, even though they have corrected it today. And that all happened because of new construction going in. So,
That was what I was going to say, same exact thing. All the new construction, nobody's asking them to fix problems. They have a lot that's a challenge. Anthony brings up great points. I mean,
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
I appreciate your wanting to mediate the issues. And I appreciate that you've been stuck with one of the last lots in this area. Your historical narrative, however, we as a board have to focus not on just what is going on today, but we have to anticipate what's going to happen tomorrow. And change, especially over the last 20 years, has been at least at the first derivative. So we have to anticipate that change and the continued acceleration. And as a result of that, we have to take a look at what we think might happen here. And we would ask that you consider that as well. So if you take your mediation soliloquy and put it in a historical perspective and put yourself into California or put yourself into some other place, we as a board have to anticipate. So 100-year events 25 years ago are 20-year events today. So we have to anticipate that and think.
But the general permit's going to object.
Please,
Sorry.
don't do that.
So my thought here is, everybody here wants to work with you. However, I would ask that you consider what we have to think about as we go through the approval process here.
Can I go first? So I hear what you're saying. And as far as future-proofing, remember, the Speedy's general permit was updated in 2012. It was updated in 2017, and it was just updated in 2021. The standards have continued to change. And what's also important is I'm not aware of an objective criteria with which we don't comply with this application, other than the rear yard variance of 13% that is the purview of the ZBA. We definitely will give you more information. We're not fighting on sharing information. But I'm not aware of an objective criteria with which we don't comply, whether it's from FEMA, Army Corps, DEC, or your town code. I understand your concern. Go ahead.
I'd just like to put what he said in other words. We do hear your concerns about the floodplain, and we want to address that. But may we pause on that for a moment and see if we've come to a footprint that if we can prove to you that the floodplain issue is not an issue for this site, is this footprint suitable? We've brought it out of the watercourse buffer. It's not impacting any wetlands. Can we come to some agreement on that? That's, because to pursue the floodplain question, we really need to know where the building's going to be. It all matters. It's all part of the equation.
Yeah, and that's actually exactly what I would hope to get some additional feedback from the board on. Anthony, you haven't really weighed in on the overall aspect of the revised plan yet. What do you think?
My personal feeling is that the limits of disturbance go right up to the wetland and right up to the watercourse buffer. They are out, but they are right up to it. My feeling is that the scale of this is still too large, and it just harkens back to something that our town supervisor says at his meetings about smart development. Is this the right development for this property? I'm not saying that this lot cannot be developed, but I question whether this that is before us is suitable.
I actually talked to the town supervisor, and he was for this.
This is...
The owner of the land, and I've actually talked to him a few times. We actually met with Mr. Cantor.
Our supervisor is not a planning board member.
But you just said that it doesn't go with the supervisor's plan, so I'm just answering what you just said.
No, let's not get into a debate about other boards and other people's opinions. We're the ones who are going to have to approve.
I'm questioning whether this is a suitable development for this property, and as provided, I'm still not convinced, although each submittal the applicant has taken small steps in the right direction. I will say no more. I've said enough on this application, so.
So let's go down at this end and just see if there are any other specific reactions to the revised plan. Any thoughts?
They've made significant changes. I just don't know, I understand, people are saying things that maybe I'm not in tune with as far as the stormwater and all that stuff, but they've had made significant changes to the plans. So,
Well, we'll obviously have to get some more feedback from CPL and from the engineering standpoint, but again, that can only be done when we have, the full set of materials to review and to respond to. Right, Rob?
Yeah, no, I agree with Bob. I mean, they've made, from starting with the original plan, they've made a significant amount of changes to the building. Stormwater thing, I cannot speak much about it.
Yeah. Well, let me throw in a few thoughts. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. So basically, I think the new building configuration is certainly going in the right direction. It came from a 5-story, 93,000 plus or minus square foot building back down to a 4-story, now 75,000 square foot, 124. And the pavement has been reduced in size and area. The parking spaces have gone down from 10 to 9. Those are all good things. Those are going in a good direction. I think a lot of the substance of this is going to be in somehow getting the process going enough so that we can start getting, some more detailed engineering. Stormwater is going to be a huge issue here, and the overall floodplain effects are going to be things that we're going to have to look at. And there are other things. Adding some more landscaping was one thought that I had early in the process, which I already commented on, which I think, we're going to need to embellish the landscaping plan to include some additional trees and shrubs, especially evergreens, for year-round buffering. So, I mean, and of course, we haven't even gotten a chance to look at the building itself, and I would very much look forward to being able to see what the architecture of this building is going to look like, but we can't do that at this point until, we're sort of all in some kind of an agreement that this could move ahead in some form and get some more details. So we're going to need like lighting details, building details. I'm actually interested in seeing what the overhang of the building over the parking area is going to look like, and how that'll be handled architecturally. And maybe there are some other things with the building that can be done sort of like that by, I know somehow cutting off certain parts of it, minimizing the footprint a little bit more with some elevating it above the floodplain a little bit. I mean, I understand you can't, for a self-storage facility, you can't elevate the whole thing and have everybody come in like on one elevator or something like that. I don't think that would work very well, but.
Well, I think by code, it has to be elevated at least 2 feet above the base flood elevation.
Yeah.
So, and it would be.
Yeah. So, of course, there are the flood aspects of protecting the building itself, which is part of the floodplain development permit. But there's the other aspect of, like downstream flooding and what the effects of this development will be on that.
Understood.
So we have to see all that.
Yes.
So, I mean, I myself would be comfortable with, saying to you as the applicant, go ahead and start putting your package together. And if some of the analysis and studies indicate that the building is still too big or not the right configuration, that can change during the process, as happens oftentimes with seeker determinations and reviews. But that's my own opinion, so I don't know if we can get a consensus out of what we've heard from other members.
I think you've come a long way from with the first plans that you've submitted, so keep on tweaking. What can I tell you?
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's still a little too big for that space. I think there's going to be challenges that maybe haven't come to light yet.
So, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Yep,
So,
please.
if the footprint that we have right now is 17,811, does anyone dare to throw out a footprint that they think would be more suitable instead of us? I mean, obviously, we are trying to work with what is the best for the client in terms of marketable self-storage facilities, and I definitely don't know that information. But I can tell you that every time that we've rerun these concepts, it's a real head crunch to make it work. And so honestly, to put together a full plan set and all of the time and money that goes into that, and then to still be working on the actual footprint is just wasteful of everyone's time and a lot of money. So if we could get some idea at this point of what it is you all really feel is suitable, if you're going to tell me that you see, that maybe we just need to shave it down to 16,000 square feet, if you could, we need to understand some order of magnitude here. I mean, if you guys are really thinking in your minds that this shouldn't be any bigger than 10,000, we need to know that today, But if this is just like a couple more thousand, honestly, I don't know if we can make it work, but we need to know before we go any further into this.
Any thoughts on that?
No, but again, all of us learned something today from Anthony, all right, which we didn't have at all, right? So that sort of puts that little thing in. I don't know what else you'd do with the lot. Make it a swimming pool. Hey, don't laugh. At one time we were thinking about, I was part of an aquifer, not aquifer, aquarium. We were thinking about putting an aquarium in it, in there, so.
In Westridge. I wish there was one. Be fun to visit.
And we were going to use the water.
I think, we hear you. We keep getting better as you push on us. And that's almost becomes almost our own peril. That you push a little bit more and it gets a little better, and you push a little more and it gets a little better. And I mean, if you think about it from a rear yard standpoint, we've gone from 53 to 83, right?
Yeah.
I just, like you said, Karen said it very eloquently as far as, tweaking, as you said, Board Member Cantor. I think tweaking we can accomplish, and we can hopefully, it is like crazy, because what happens is you're seeing the outside of the building, and then we got to make sure the inside, you've had other self-storage, we got to make sure the inside fit out with the pieces that you get from the nationals, right, works, so you can actually have something you make money on. Real estate is a business you get rich in very slowly over time. And it's a major capital investment, as you know, on the front side with self-storage compared to many other asset classes. So if it's tweaking, I think we'll buy some more Excedrin and we'll go there. If it's a major overhaul that you're thinking that all of a sudden we're going to come in, as Karen said, and it's going to be like this tiny little building, there's no market for it. So if it's tweaking, we'll do it. We'll gladly do it again and take it a little darker.
Well, and by tweaking, we mean 2 or 2,000 square feet or so. I mean, we're not, that's tweaking in our minds. I just want to be clear. I like to be very straightforward.
And I think the real play for us, and this is dangerous to speak extemporaneously like this, is I think it's more to play with cantilevering on the first floor a little bit. See if we can get a little bit more waterized in and out, right? That way. But, you know, floors 2, 3, and 4, staying at a similar footprint to what you see today.
Right.
But can we do a little bit more with cantilevering, a little bit more extra cost on the steel on the front end and figure out the structural loading? Because this isn't a house, right? This isn't even an office building. When we start loading, we're loading stuff that people are storing.
That's a concern.
PSI per foot gets really to be the game. So how much can we cantilever? But we can go try and play that idea a little bit. I mean, I think the good news, Chairman, is that no one's really going to see this at the end.
It's too bad Frank Lloyd Wright isn't still around to help out with this. He was great.
No, because he would have put it in the middle.
He was great at cantilever.
He would have spent a waterfall.
Yeah.
We would have had a waterfall, right? You know, right through the middle of the house.
And it would have leaked.
Just for sure. Well, you know what he said about Taliesin, right? You don't put the house on the knoll, because then you can't go up to the knoll and look at back down at the house.
There you go.
Yep.
Well, yes.
So-
We will sharpen our pencils again.
But we do need to know what you have in your minds, please.
I think we'll call it. We got it. We won't get over it.
You're good? Yeah. I guess we have an idea forming already.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
So
Thank you all. Have a good night.
we look
Jeez,
forward.
sorry about that. I would just recommend with this revised layout and the whole idea of the overhang cantilever idea that you solicit input from the fire department sooner than later.
We already have.
Okay.
We've been frequently interacting
John,
with
you're
them.
speaking up as a
Thank
great
you.
point. Chairman, I know it's not your normal practice, but I think we could really help enlisting John as we go through this. Would it be possible for us to have a direct dialogue with John while we're doing this before we come back, so we don't, I think it'll help us be less iterative.
Sure, if John, if you're willing to do that.
Yeah, that's fine.
You know, I think it might be helpful at this point, even without seeing, you know,
Would
more
help
detailed
us.
drawings, to just be able to provide them with some input on your ideas and how the engineering aspects of it might be able to be worked out.
Sure.
And we can copy Dominic on that, so there's, you know, we're not trying to, we're just
Yep.
trying to facilitate it.
Do we need a motion?
So why don't we get a motion, why don't we say a motion to authorize both of our consultants, attorney and engineering, to have communications with the applicant's team. Would someone like to move that? Ravi?
I move.
Ravi moves it. Is there a second?
Second.
Jody seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, just hang on one second here. Okay. Well, that's it for the formal part of the agenda. And we're okay. We're okay here. So there are two things I wanted to do. The first one has to do with planning board training, and that'll be real quick. But I did want to mention that there is a New York Planning Federation annual Planning and Zoning Conference in person, finally, for a change, coming up in April. And I sent out an email, I forwarded that to all of the board members.
Yeah.
And I know it's probably difficult for a lot of us to make it, especially those of us who work pretty much full-time, to get up there, because it's a Sunday through a Tuesday. But nonetheless, if anyone is able to do it, I'm thinking that I'm probably going to go up at least for one day. So Debbie, does our budget still allow for covering registration for?
I think there's $1,000 overall in our budget.
Mhm.
Whoopee.
So we can all
Or
go.
1,200.
1,200. So,
What is the registration fee?
well, so the registration, yeah, $240 for full registration. For one day only is like 200 and something. And then there are hotel reservations for staying overnight. That would be up to individuals,
Right.
ourselves,
They
to
won't
cover.
that.
And this is at Saratoga?
It's in Saratoga Springs, beautiful downtown Saratoga, in the Saratoga Hilton.
Been there.
There are going to be quite a number of training workshops and sessions. Really,
The first day agenda was really great.
So is
Yeah, did you get
a
it?
full day event?
The second day was, half a day, and it was small houses, and
yeah, I think what a lot of people tend to do is book a hotel for Sunday night, stay for the full, as many sessions as you can take on Monday. And there's also, Monday is the awards luncheon, which is a great thing that we put together. And then Saratoga is not so far that you couldn't, drive home after, say the last session at like 4 o'clock. So one day, for some people might work better than
What's the
staying 2
dates
nights.
of it? April what?
So it's
it's a Sunday and
April 16th, Sunday, April 16th through Tuesday, the 18th.
registration. Monday is the full day.
Yeah.
So it's Saturday and Sunday?
No. Listen, it's starting Sunday. The sessions do not start Sunday, but Sunday, they usually have some cocktail hours and, get-togethers. You stay overnight usually because the sessions start pretty early in the morning. Although some people I've known to not even stay overnight and just drive up very early on Monday, stay for the Monday sessions and then drive home. That's an option that you have too.
That's a long day.
It's a long day.
And it's a long day.
It's a long day. That's why I would recommend for most people to drive up Sunday, tour downtown Saratoga Springs, which is beautiful to walk around, especially if we continue having this kind of weather.
So, just to get an idea, what kind of sessions will they be able to on Monday? So,
Well, take a look on the website. There's a link to the actual tentative session schedule by going to,
My wife's having her eyes
Where is it?
operated.
Yeah, there's a
It's
click
on
here
here,
button, and
yeah.
it takes you right to the.
yeah. But, I mean, so it's a variety of some basic sessions for new planning board members, which for some of you would be good. There are some more detailed sessions for people who would like to see what's going on in the planning and zoning field, and, sustainable planning and all those kinds of good things. So take a look at it.
Mr. Chair, I cannot go. My wife's having an operation, her eyes operated on that day.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I can only go if my wife lets me.
So she'll have to sign a form authorizing you to go. We could bring her here and have a vote.
Is it Tuesday too?
how far is the drive?
Ends on
Saratoga
Tuesday.
Springs, well, Albany is like an hour and a half drive from here, so Saratoga's another 45 minutes.
Stay Monday, drive home Monday.
Yeah, so it's not bad.
And the town pays for the.
Yeah, it's like,
No.
it's like
Just your
registration. 2.5 hours
Yeah, 2.5 hours. If you-
with a stop.
It starts at 8:15, so you'd have to leave at 5:30.
Yes, you don't drive with me.
It's a long,
I've been to Lake George.
How long does it take to get there?
it's 3 hours.
The other thing I'll have to find out is whether they may be recording some of these sessions and then making them available, at some other point for viewing,
It's an easy trip.
like they
but
do
it's
with the
straight
regular
up.
webinars that they put on.
busy weekend, if I remember it.
Anyway, I just thought you should know about it, and it's something to think about.
Thanks.
And when do we have
I
to
like the
let
in-person
the town know if you're going?
Sometime in March.
Yeah, sometime in March. There is a registration deadline of March 29th, so there's time. And then, if you are interested in the hotel room, then,
Hotel is up to individuals, right? And it's nobody, we are paying.
yeah.
I think there's a rate at that.
Yeah, the
They
rate,
probably have them discount.
it's not real cheap, but for a regular room, it's $149 a night.
Yeah.
Not terrible.
If you're going to,
Plus tax, yeah.
hey, if you're going to spend the night, double. I was just up there in June for, last June.
Yeah.
Well, I guess next last June. The restaurant in the hotel is not very good. But it's walking distance to a lot of
A lot
other
of, yeah, a
places.
lot of restaurants.
So,
Yes.
There's a Burke restaurant in town, which is 4-star, it's outstanding.
no, yeah, the rest of town is good, but that whole,
Yeah, and, things like, the hotel will cater, breakfast that's covered with your hotel, with your registration fee. And then the luncheon, if you're going for one day, then there's a separate price for the luncheon, the awards dinner luncheon, for an extra $75, but you would probably want to go to that because that really gives you an opportunity to see what people are doing around the state with projects and people being recognized for good work. So it's a cool thing to go to.
you going, Debbie? You going?
It's not in my budget.
How many people generally attend this, like 100,
I can't
200?
afford to lose the days from town hall.
How many people attend these? Well, I'll tell you, in the old days when they had them in the Catskills at places like the Nebele and Grossender's.
Oh, no, now you're going way back.
Way back.
Now you're going back.
That's how old I am, Fred.
Eh.
And I used to go to some of them. You would get 900 people attending. And some of those big resort hotels were big enough to hold that many people. Nowadays, you're looking more at like the 350, 400 range. Yeah, it's a large crowd. And again, we haven't held one of these in, since pre-pandemic times. Like,
So I'm sure, there'll be a lot.
I think 2019 was the last time we had one.
Yeah, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of people.
So do we see you, Debbie, for registration?
I don't have that works. I have no idea.
Okay.
Well-
I'll have to call, probably I would suggest you call the controller.
What we can do, and which I've usually done when I used to go up to them, is put it on your credit card. And it's actually now easy to use your credit card for the registration. And then, after the fact, put in a voucher request.
Yep.
Once you get your invoice and all that. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
I have to double check that budget one.
If we wanted to do a voucher, then you could check, I don't know if we want to put the burden on you, Debbie, but at least maybe be able to check to see what that budget is and how many
Yeah, I just
people.
said I'm gonna have to check that, and I think the town board has to approve what you attend as well, so I'll have to double check.
Yeah, but this, knowing that this would be fulfilling, more than a full year's worth of training requirement for the board
Yeah,
member
I
would be
just-
an easy thing.
If I remember from pre-pandemic, there was only enough to cover 2 members to go, so I just have to check.
Yeah, I know, yeah, that's, yeah, the board gives me that.
So we doing rock, paper, scissors?
Well, I'm
Well-
definitely not going to attend if that opens up a opportunity. I know Fred's not, so keep that in mind, I
Yeah.
guess.
And you
So
got
like,
my
you're not
answer.
gonna get like all of us saying yes, so you've already got a
Yeah.
couple of.
There are actually some, boards around the state where they send their whole board. That's pretty cool.
Maybe they have a lot more money.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we would need a little bit higher budget for doing something like that. Anyway, okay, so that's all I had on that. So I know we did end up talking a good bit about the performance bond question. I'm wondering whether at this point it's not too late, but I'll leave it up to the board if you want, if you like or you are able. We could go into a closed session to seek advice of our attorney. Of course, if we do that, no actions would be taken. It would just simply be to talk about legal and procedural aspects of a particular subject. And if we do that also, we can tell our audio people that they can shut down the recording and the broadcasting and.
John, I can't really hear you good. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Sorry, I'm facing that way too
Okay.
much.
I just can't hear you good. I want
Yeah,
to make sure.
so
I hear
I'm just saying that if we do go into closed session, we can have the broadcast and recording of the meeting shut down because it would be a closed session anyway, and we'll come right back after the closed session is over and just simply adjourn. We won't be taking any actions. It would simply be to discuss the legal and procedural aspects of a particular subject. So, and if we do it, I would certainly suggest that we don't spend too much time doing it. I'm sure we'd all like to get home.
Sure.
But this is a good opportunity since we are
It's so early.
ending the formal, yeah, it's so early. We don't know what to do with ourselves. We can't just go home yet.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Chairman, I'm a little in a quandary as to what the issue is.
well, you'll find out in a minute. It's not like, this isn't exactly an executive session where we kind of have, by guidelines of the open meetings law, have to say generally what the discussion is about. This is to simply seek the advice of our attorney. So if someone would like to make a motion to go into closed session, as I call it, there are probably other terms. It's not an executive session specifically, but it's a closed session, closed to the public. And my recommendation would be that all of us stay for that, because I think it would pertain to
I make that motion.
Fred. Okay, seconded by Jody. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we'll have them shut down the audio-visual system.